This is all stuff that wears away on people's souls, people's consciousness, people's views of mainstream coverage of certain issues. So cute, my little Hasanito. Outrageous. Israeli parliament approves bill to ban UNRWA. Let's see how the New York Times covered that. How a UN agency became a flashpoint of the war in Gaza. That's in September. That's from the New York Times Magazine. Let's go to the New York Times. Let's see how they're covered it. Maybe they're covering it well. I don't know, because this is like genuinely fucked up. Okay. Trump team fears damage from racist rally remarks. Harris points to Trump rally. Adam Schiff, Montana, Michelle Obama decries double standard. Suspect vehicle. Israel passes bill that threatens work of UN agency for Palestinians. Israel's parliament passes bill that threatens work of UN agency for Palestinians. The Knesset opened its winter session and approved legislation that banned the agency known as UNRWA from operating in Israel. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said his spy chief was back home from the Gaza ceasefire talks in Qatar. The Israeli parliament approved a bill on Monday that would ban the main UN agency aiding Palestinians from operating in the country. It was not immediately clear how far the bill would be applied and when and whether it would be put into effect, but it appeared to threaten some of the functions of the agency. The United States and 7 other countries, including Britain, France, Germany, have in recent days urged Israel not to ban the agency, which is known as UNRWA. Well, why did they fucking stop the funding of it then? They argued that it does vital work, not least on behalf of civilians in the Gaza Strip, which is in the midst of a humanitarian disaster. Let's look at this. CNN actually had a pretty solid title for this, by the way. Israel has banned UN Agency for Palestinian Refugees. That could be devastating for millions. This is good. This is correct. This is the correct way to cover this story. Okay? New York Times is probably one of the worst in terms of mainstream outlets that literally uses the most like neutral language whenever Israel does the most heinous shit. They're so bad on Israel. Like, they are so incredibly bad on Israel. Prosecutors seeking warrants for Israeli leaders dismisses misconduct accusations as disinformation. That's Kareem Khan, by the way. South Africa submits its genocide case against Israel to the top UN court. Israel's Knesset passes bills banning UNRWA, the agency that aids Palestinians. October has been a relatively costly month for the Israeli military. Israel's parliament is expected to consider bills on conscription, a UN agency of terrorism. Israel says it targeted Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanese port city. Like this is a perfect example. Israel says it targeted Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanese port city. Oh, if Israel says so, then yeah. Never mind. Like, this is really heinous shit. The fact that they don't even mention that they falsely smeared UNRWA, which is the lifeline for Palestinians. The mere fact that they call it the Israel-Hamas war, which is what every single fucking outlet does, instead of calling it what it is, a genocide, is directly at odds with what people can see. It's making it seem as though this is like two parties that are at odds with one another, equally militarized states that are fighting one another. Joe Biden, I was thinking about this the other day. Joe Biden called what Russia is doing in Ukraine, a genocide multiple times, even though there is an asymmetry there, of course, but Ukraine is still a sovereign state. Okay? There's a reason why I do not call what Israel is doing in Lebanon a genocide in the same vein that I call what Israel is doing in Gaza a genocide. I very deliberately say Israel's bombing campaigns in Lebanon while simultaneously talk about Gaza in different terms. Okay? I'm not doing this to minimize what Israel is doing in Lebanon ever. Okay? That much is clear. It's just that there is an intent to engage in ethnic cleansing and displacement in Gaza. Okay? Joe Biden has called what Russia's doing a genocide, even though it's a state versus state situation. And one state is directly being funded by America and other Western allies in this circumstance. While there is an asymmetry there, I would not consider that to be a genocide. Just like I wouldn't consider what Israel's doing at this stage in Lebanon to be a genocide. At this stage. Yet the media doesn't do that. Not only do they not do that, but they also consistently normalize Israel's actions. They couch it under justifications, like they make it seem as though it's a reasonable action that they are taking. And it's completely unacceptable. And they don't just do this with Israel-Palestine. They don't do this just for Gaza. They do this for a litany of other issues as well. They do this for all of the most right-wing, idiotic things that like Trump supporters say. It's in some ways not that different in terms of like normalizing an otherwise irrational and right-wing position that is born not out of reality, not out of any real concern, but instead born out of right-wing panic and hysteria. They do this when it came down to Black Lives Matter as a movement. They did this with the election deniers that they posted glamour shots of as early as this morning when I was talking about that. They did this with anti-abortion activists. This is all stuff that wears away on people's souls, people's consciousness, people's views of mainstream coverage of certain issues. That's how you slowly but surely hemorrhage whatever good faith that people might place upon you, whatever belief that people might have in you doing a good job, honestly covering whatever the fuck's going on. Well, you just did it to Ukrainian people, didn't you? What? What do you mean? Scumbags are doing Ukraine shit on you again? Wait, what? What happened? What did I do? Anytime you mention Ukraine, someone will say you are not sufficiently pro-Ukrainian. Oh, apparently a podcaster mentioned it. What? a certain live stream on YouTube happened today where they said you were anti-Ukraine? What? Oh. I like that if the smearing of me as an anti-Semite who like denies rapes wouldn't stick because people could see it with their own eyes. Now we're just going back to like even older shit. Sure. You don't think all war crimes are genocide, so people are dumb and you're not? Yeah, I mean, that's why I made the distinction between Lebanon and Gaza. Oh. Yeah. If we go back far enough, maybe people will start talking about how I bought a house. You know?
Knesset is examining a legislation that would ban UNRWA in work that would be able to work in Israel and in East Jerusalem. What are your thoughts on that?
So we have made quite clear to the government of Israel that we are deeply concerned by this proposed legislation. The Secretary raised this in the letter that he sent with Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of Defense to Minister of Defense Gallant and Minister of Strategic Affairs Dermer a little over 2 weeks ago. As he made clear in that letter, passage of this legislation could have implications under U.S. law and U.S. policy. That remains the case. Look, UNRWA plays a critical, important role in delivering humanitarian assistance to civilians that need it in Gaza. That's not the only role they play. They play an important role providing services to Palestinians in the West Bank and throughout the region as well. But they really play an irreplaceable role right now in Gaza, where they are on the front lines getting humanitarian assistance to the people they need it. There's nobody that can replace them right now in the middle of the crisis. So we continue to urge the government of Israel to pause the implementation of this legislation. We urge them not to pass it at all. And we will consider next steps based on what happens in the days ahead.
Two weeks ago,
Prem here.
U.S. sent a letter to Israel urging it to improve the situation in Gaza, specifically in northern Gaza. Let's see what they've done.
The U.S. sent a letter to Israel urging it to improve the humanitarian situation in Gaza and to follow international law. The U.S. gave Israel a 30-day deadline and floated implications for U.S. policy, but as we've asked U.S. officials, they've sometimes been evasive as to what exactly it might mean if Israel doesn't comply. I thought it might be helpful to give you guys a quick sense of how things have gone in the 12 days since then. Since the U.S. sent this letter, the Israeli military has targeted a kid and then bombed him and the people who were trying to help him as he pleaded for help in the streets, banned 6 aid organizations from Gaza, repeatedly bombed a refugee camp, attacked and besieged the remaining hospitals in northern Gaza, and detained doctors working in them. And they also bombed an oxygen station at one of these hospitals, killing kids in the ICU, killed 4 engineers fixing water systems, killed 3 journalists in Lebanon, rounded up people, separated them from their families, and tied up and blindfolded them, bombed an UNRWA shelter, killed a 59-year-old woman as she harvested olives on her land in the West Bank, repeatedly attacked United Nations peacekeepers in Lebanon, and all the while, top Israeli ministers spoke at a conference called, quote, Preparing to Settle Gaza, where they talked about controlling Gaza for years. Civil defense and rescue workers, meanwhile, stopped operating in northern Gaza, saying Israeli forces abducted several of their workers and bombed their only fire truck. Our Palestinian press colleague Hossam Shabat reports that, in fact, no aid has entered the besieged area of northern Gaza. And speaking of, the Israeli government publicly accused 6 journalists, including Hossam, of being terrorists, essentially tweeting out a hit list after the Israeli military has already killed at least 128 of our press colleagues since last year, making it the deadliest period for journalists since such tracking began. It seems almost like the Israeli government has responded to U.S. requests to follow international law by committing violations of international law.
The bill outlawing UNRWA, the one UN agency that is responsible for crucial aid for hundreds of thousands of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank, was approved with a staggering support of 92 out of 120 members of the Knesset. Only 10 opposed. 9 Palestinian members of the Knesset and the one Jew in the Communist Party. Whew. What is our VP doing?
天上太阳风呀风风风嘞，心中太阳是毛泽东飞，看看你的我们的结伴嘞，这里本身当家做主人，一呀一次哟，漂亮，会的话。